Hey, my name's Liam. I'm 25 and I work at a small woodworking shop just off the square in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. It's the kind of place where the streets are lined with maple trees that turn gold every fall, and the air always carries a faint scent of sawdust and coffee from the roasters down the block. The shop's been in my boss's family for 3 generations, and I've been there since I was 19, learning how to shape raw timber into something that lasts. I rent a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. Waking up to the smell of cinnamon rolls every morning is about as close to luxury as I get. Life's simple. I like it that way. Most evenings after sanding down the last piece of oak or wiping sawdust off my jeans, I head to Bluebird Cafe. It's a cozy spot 2 blocks from the shop, brick walls, warm pendant lights, and a chalkboard menu that hasn't changed in years. The baristas know me by name, and my order's always the same: a medium black coffee and a classic burger, no frills, extra pickles. I sit at table 5 near the window where I can watch the world go by without being part of it. There's something about the routine that keeps me grounded. The clink of cups, the hum of conversation, the way the light slants through the glass just before sunset, it's predictable, and I need that. That evening was no different, or so I thought. I'd had a long day at the shop wrestling with a stubborn walnut plank that refused to cooperate. My hands were still rough from the planer, and I could feel the ache in my shoulders as I pushed open the cafe door. The bell jingled, and the familiar smell of roasted beans hit me like a warm hug. I nodded at Sarah, the barista, who was already pouring my coffee. "Burger's coming up, Liam," she called, and I gave her a tired grin before settling at my usual spot. Table 6, right next to mine, was occupied. I hadn't noticed her at first. She was quiet, almost blending into the soft glow of the cafe. She wore a red dress, simple but striking, the kind that catches your eye without trying too hard. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, a few strands framing her face. She sat straight, posture perfect, but her fingers kept tapping the edge of her water glass, and her eyes flicked to the watch on her wrist every few seconds. Nervous. Waiting. I didn't mean to stare, but something about her pulled my attention. Maybe it was the way she held herself, like she was bracing for something. 45 minutes passed. Her water glass was nearly empty, the ice melted into slivers. She hadn't touched the menu. I was halfway through my burger when the door swung open and a man strode in. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a sharp gray suit that screamed downtown office. His watch glinted under the lights, probably worth more than my monthly rent. He scanned the room, spotted her, and walked over with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She stood to greet him, a small smile flickering on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but the tables were close and the cafe wasn't loud. His voice carried low but clear, the kind of tone that expects to be heard. "Elena Wright," he said, "not sitting yet." She nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I didn't know you were actually deaf." The words hit like a slap. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Elena's shoulders stiffened, her lips parting slightly as if she'd been caught off guard. I don't read lips fluently, but I didn't need to. Her face told the story: shock, then a flash of pain that she quickly buried. She signed something, her hands moving with precision, but the guy just stared, his brow furrowing like she'd spoken in another language. Maybe to him she had. "Look," he said, cutting her off before she could finish. "I have standards. Dating someone deaf isn't one of them." He didn't even sit down. Just turned, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked out the door, swinging shut behind him. The cafe went quiet for a second, or maybe it was just me, my pulse loud in my ears. Elena didn't move. She sank back into her chair, her hands gripping the glass so tightly I thought it might crack. Her eyes were fixed on the table, glistening but not spilling over. She wasn't crying, not yet. She was holding it together, but barely. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my fists clenching under the table. What kind of person says that and just walks away? I wanted to follow him, to say something, anything, but what would that fix? It wouldn't undo the hurt carved into her face. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the way she sat there so small in that red dress, or the way her hands trembled just slightly. Maybe it was my mom, her own struggles with hearing loss, the way she'd taught me to sign before I could even ride a bike. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Sarah glanced over from the counter, but I didn't look back. I walked the few steps to table 6, my heart pounding harder than it had any right to. Elena didn't notice me at first. Her eyes were still down her fingers, tracing the rim of the glass. I didn't speak. Words felt wrong, too loud for the moment. Instead, I raised my hands and signed slow and deliberate the way my mom had taught me. You deserve better than that. Her head snapped up. Her eyes widened, searching my face like she couldn't believe what she'd just seen. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't sign back. Then slowly her lips curved into the faintest smile, not happy, but real. She signed her hands graceful despite the tremor. You know, ASL. I nodded, keeping my hand steady. My mom's hard of hearing. I grew up with it. She stared at me, and for the first time that night, the tension in her shoulders eased just a little. The cafe hummed around us, but at table 6 it felt like the world had paused, waiting for whatever came next. Elena's hands hovered in the air for a second, like she was deciding whether to trust the moment. Then she signed again, slower this time, her fingers spelling out her name, Elena. She paused, then added, "Thank you for that." Her eyes held mine warm but guarded, like someone who'd been burned before and wasn't sure if the heat was gone. I gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I sit?" She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and I pulled out the chair, the wood creaking softly under my weight. The cafe's noise filtered back in clinking spoons, the hiss of the espresso machine, but it felt distant, like it was happening in another room. I set my half-eaten burger aside, forgotten. "I'm Liam," I said, speaking and signing at the same time, a habit I'd picked up from years with my mom. "I work at the woodworking shop down the street. Usually I'm just here for the pickles." I tried for a smile, hoping to lighten the air. It worked, sort of. The corner of her mouth twitched, and she signed back, "Pickles are a solid reason." Up close, she was even more striking than I'd realized from table 5. Her red dress hugged her frame without showing off, and her eyes, hazel flecked with green, carried a quiet intensity, like she was always observing, always processing. There was a small scar just above her left eyebrow, faint but noticeable, and I wondered where it came from but didn't ask. Not yet. She tilted her head, signing, "You didn't have to do that." "Stand up for me." Her hands moved with a nurse's precision, each gesture clean and deliberate. I could tell she was used to making herself understood, even when the world didn't bother to listen. I shrugged, signing back. Didn't feel right letting that guy walk away like he did. I paused, then added, speaking softly, "My mom lost most of her hearing after a car accident when I was 8. People used to talk over her like she wasn't even there. I know what it's like to watch someone you care about get dismissed." Elena's expression softened, and for the first time she looked at me like I wasn't just a stranger who'd wandered over. She signed, "Your mom's lucky to have you." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "I'm a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I work with kids who are scared of needles and parents who are scared of everything else." I grinned. "Sounds like you've got your hands full." She laughed, a small, quiet sound that didn't need volume to carry. "You have no idea. Yesterday, a 4-year-old told me my stethoscope was a monster listener." Her hands painted the scene, mimicking the kid's wide eyes and dramatic gestures. I couldn't help but laugh too, the kind that comes from your gut and surprises you. We talked or signed or both for what felt like minutes, but must have been longer. Sarah dropped off the check from my table, giving me a raised eyebrow that I ignored. Elena told me she'd lost her hearing at 15 after a bout of meningitis that came on fast and left her world silent. It was like someone flipped a switch. She signed, her face calm, but her eyes distant. One day I could hear my mom singing in the kitchen. The next, nothing. I nodded, signing, "My mom says silence isn't empty. It's just a different kind of full." Elena's eyes lit up at that, and she repeated the phrase, her hands lingering on the signs for full and different. The cafe was starting to empty, the evening crowd thinning out. I didn't want to leave, but I didn't want to push either. I tore a corner off my napkin, scribbled my number, and slid it across the table. Then I signed, "Coffee next week, no pressure." Just coffee. I added a small smile, hoping it didn't look as nervous as I felt. She looked at the napkin, then at me, and nodded. Wednesday, she signed. "Same time deal." I signed back, standing up. I left a tip under my plate and walked out the bell, jingling behind me. The night air was cool, the streetlights casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I didn't look back, but I could feel her eyes on me, and it took everything not to grin like an idiot the whole way home. Wednesday came faster than I expected. I'd spent the days in between at the shop sanding a dining table for a neighbor, but my mind kept drifting to table 6. I told myself it was just coffee, nothing more, but I changed shirts twice before leaving the apartment. When I walked into Bluebird Cafe, Elena was already there at the same table wearing a navy sweater and jeans. She looked up and waved a real smile this time, not the guarded one from before. I ordered my usual plus a hot chocolate for her. She'd signed last time. That coffee kept her up all night. We settled into an easy rhythm, signing and talking about everything and nothing. She told me about a kid at the hospital who drew her a picture of a dinosaur wearing a nurse's cap. I told her about the table I was building, how the grain of the wood told a story if you knew how to read it. Every knot's a scar, I signed. Makes it stronger, not weaker. She nodded, her hands tracing the shape of a knot in the air, like people she signed. Scars don't break us. They show we survived. Those Wednesday coffees became a ritual. We'd meet at 6 after her shift and my day at the shop. Sometimes we talked about work. Her stories about kids always made me laugh, and I'd show her photos of whatever I was building, rough sketches on napkins. Other times we didn't need words. She'd sign about a song she used to love, describing the vibrations she could still feel in her chest. I'd sign about my mom's old record player, how she danced to songs she couldn't hear anymore. There were moments when our hands brushed, passing a menu or a sugar packet, and neither of us pulled away. It wasn't rushed, wasn't forced. It was like weaving a blanket one stitch at a time, each one small but building something warm. I started looking forward to Wednesdays the way I used to look forward to finishing a perfect cut of wood, something that felt right down to the core. One evening, as the cafe lights dimmed and the barista started stacking chairs, Elena signed, "This doesn't feel like just coffee anymore." Her eyes were steady, searching mine. I didn't look away. "It doesn't," I signed back. "And I'm okay with that." She smiled, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't caution or pain. It was trust, fragile but growing like a seedling, pushing through spring soil. Those Wednesday coffees spilled over into the weekend, slow and natural, like sap rising in spring. One Saturday, Elena texted well signed in a message, her way of keeping things visual, even on screens. "Park near your shop, bring Milo." Milo was her rescue dog, a scruffy golden retriever mix with one ear that flopped more than the other. She'd adopted him from the hospital's therapy program. He'd been abandoned, scared of loud noises that he couldn't hear anyway. I'd met him briefly during one of our cafe meetups when she brought him in on a leash, his tail thumping silently against the floor as he leaned into her leg. I showed up at Willow Park with a couple of leashes and a frisbee I'd carved from scrap wood at the shop, lightweight pine, sanded smooth. The park was quiet that morning, paths crunching under fallen leaves, the air crisp with the promise of rain later. Elena was already there, sitting on a bench, Milo at her feet. She wore a green jacket, jeans, and boots, her hair loose for the first time I'd seen it. She waved when she spotted me, and Milo bounded over, sniffing my hands before licking my fingers, tasting the sawdust I could never fully wash off. We walked the loop trail, Milo tugging ahead, his paws kicking up dirt. Elena signed as we went, her hands free and expressive. He loves this park, feels the vibrations of the birds landing. I nodded, signing back. My mom always said, "Dogs hear with their hearts." She smiled at that, reaching down to ruffle Milo's fur. We didn't talk much at first, just walked the silence between us, comfortable, not empty. I'd learned to read her moods in the way her shoulders relaxed or her fingers drummed against her thigh. As the weeks turned into a month, our routines wove together. She'd stop by the shop after her shift, watching me plane a board or assemble a chair frame. I'd sign explanations. "This joint's a dovetail strong, no nails needed." She'd trace the wood with her fingers, feeling the grain, and sign like trust. Invisible but holds everything. I started leaving small things for her, a carved bookmark, a tiny bird feeder shaped like an open hand. She'd leave notes in my toolbox signed on sticky paper, "Hope your day's smooth as this edge." There were evenings when words weren't needed at all. We'd sit on my apartment's small balcony, Milo curled at our feet, watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and pinks. She'd lean her head on my shoulder and I'd feel the steady rise and fall of her breathing. One night she taught me a new sign, peace. her hand flat against her chest, then opening like a flower. I repeated it my fingers, brushing hers. She held on a second longer, then signed, "This feels like peace." It wasn't all quiet bliss. Elena had her days, the hospital shifts that drained her, the kids who didn't make it, the parents who lashed out in grief. She'd sign about it in short bursts, her hands sharp with frustration. I'd listen, signing back stories from the shop to distract her, the client who wanted a table that floated, or the time I glued my fingers together. She'd laugh, the tension easing from her face. And I had my own shadows nights when the apartment felt too big, memories of my mom's harder days creeping in. Elena would sense it, her hand on my arm, signing, "You're not alone." We started signing in public more, not caring who stared. At the grocery store, she'd point to apples and sign red or green. I'd sign back, "Green like your jacket." People glanced, some curious, some uncomfortable, but it didn't matter. Our world had its own language, one that didn't need volume. Then came the afternoon in the park that changed things. It was a sunny Saturday, leaves crunching underfoot as we walked Milo along the river path. He was chasing a squirrel leash taut when a group of teenagers, maybe 16, loud and restless, spotted us. They were lounging on the grass, energy drinks in hand, laughing too hard at nothing. One of them noticed Elena signing to me about Milo's silly run. He nudged his friend and they started mimicking her exaggerated hand waves, mocking faces, pretending to talk in gibberish signs. Elena froze mid-sign, her hand dropping. I saw the color drain from her face, the way her shoulders curled in like she wanted to disappear. Milo sensed it too, whining and pressing against her leg. The kids laughed harder, one of them yelling, "What's she saying, blah blah hands?" Anger hit me like a chisel to wood, sharp hot. I handed Milo's leash to Elena and stepped forward, my boots crunching gravel. The group went quiet as I approached, but the smirks lingered. I didn't yell, didn't need to. I raised my hands and signed, clear and deliberate, right in their faces. Difference doesn't make someone weak. Ignorance does. They stared, confused at first, then uncomfortable. One muttered, "Whatever, man," but the bravado was gone. They grabbed their stuff and shuffled off, muttering under their breath. I watched them go, my heart still pounding, then turned back to Elena. She was staring at me, eyes wide, Milo sitting protectively at her side. Her hands trembled as she signed, "You didn't have to." But I cut her off, signing back, "Yes, I did. No one gets to make you feel small." She didn't sign anything for a long moment. Then she stepped forward, wrapped her arms around me, and held on tight. Her head buried in my chest, I felt her shake, not from tears, but from something deeper, like relief finally breaking through. Milo whined and nudged us both. I held her there in the middle of the path, the river murmuring beside us. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright, and she signed, "Thank you for standing in front of me." We walked the rest of the way in silence, but it was the kind that wrapped around you like a blanket. Her hand found mine, fingers interlacing, and she squeezed once firm. That squeeze said more than any words could. It said, "I see you too." From that day, something shifted. The warmth between us wasn't just growing, it was rooting deep and unbreakable. The rain started as a soft patter against the cafe windows, the kind of Portland evening that made everything outside look like a watercolor painting. Bluebird Cafe was quieter than usual. Just a few regulars hunched over laptops and the low hum of the espresso machine. Elena and I claimed table 6 again, our table, the one with the slight wobble that I'd fixed with the folded coaster weeks ago. She wore a soft gray sweater, sleeves pushed up, and her hair was down, curling slightly from the damp air. I had sawdust on my jeans from the shop, but she didn't seem to mind. We'd been coming here every Wednesday for months now, but tonight felt different. The air between us carried weight, like the moment before you set a chisel to wood and commit to the cut. I'd been carrying something in my pocket all day, a small piece of maple I'd carved during lunch breaks, sanded smooth until it felt like a river stone. My hands were steady at the shop, but they'd trembled when I etched the final lines. Elena sipped her hot chocolate, signing about a tough day at the hospital, a premature baby who'd finally gone home to his parents. Her hands moved with the same gentle precision she used with her patients, painting the scene, the tiny fists, the mother's tears, the father's shaky smile. I listened, signing back about the bookshelf I'd finished for a local library, how the kids would run their fingers over the carved owls on the sides. She smiled, tracing an invisible owl in the air. The rain picked up, drumming harder against the glass. The cafe lights flickered once, then steadied. I set my coffee down and reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the wood. Elena noticed her brow lifting in curiosity. "What's that?" she signed, leaning forward. I placed the small piece on the table between us. It was no bigger than a matchbox polished to a warm glow. Carved into the surface were two ASL signs, deep and deliberate family. The hand shape for F circling the chest, then opening to connect and trust, two hands clasping fingers interlaced. I'd practiced the lines for days, making sure every curve was exact, every edge soft enough not to catch a fingertip. Elena's eyes widened. She reached out her fingers, hovering over the wood before tracing the sign, slow and reverent. "You made this," she signed, her hands trembling just slightly. I nodded, signing back, "For you. For us." She looked up and I saw the question forming before she signed it. Why these words? Her eyes searched mine, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since that first night. I took a breath, my hands steady now, and signed, "Because you're not just someone I meet for coffee anymore. You're home." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She picked up the carving, holding it like it might vanish. Then she signed, her movements careful. "Are you sure I'll be a different wife?" The word wife hung in the air, heavy and real, her hands pausing, as if testing its weight. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers, the wood warm between our palms. I signed with my free hand, slow and deliberate. "Different doesn't make you less, it makes you one of a kind." Then, speaking softly so she could read my lips if she needed, I added, "I don't want a perfect life. I want a real one. With you." Her eyes glistened, and for a moment I thought she might pull away the way she used to when things got too close. But she didn't. She squeezed my hand, her fingers tight around mine, and signed, "I'm scared, but I want this too." The rain was a roar, now blurring the world outside. Inside it was just us, table 6, and the faint scent of coffee and wet wool. I signed, "We don't have to rush, but I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek, and she didn't bother to wipe it away. Instead, she signed, "I've never felt this scene. Not since before." We sat there until Sarah started stacking chairs, the universal sign that closing time was near. I paid for our drinks and we stepped out into the rain, sharing my jacket over our heads. The streets were slick, reflecting the neon glow of the cafe sign. Elena tucked the carved wood into her pocket, her hand brushing mine as we walked to her car. The next few weeks were a quiet whirlwind. We started talking about the future, not in grand, sweeping plans, but in small, tangible pieces. She showed me listings for houses with big windows and space for a garden. I sketched ideas for a built-in bookshelf in a nook where she could read to Milo, or someday to kids who might call her mom. We didn't say when or if, we just let the ideas settle like dust on a finished table. One evening after a long day at the shop, I came home to find Elena on my balcony, Milo asleep at her feet. She'd let herself in with the spare key I'd given her weeks ago. She was sketching on a napkin stick figures of us and Milo, a house with a crooked chimney. I sat beside her, signing, "You're planning already." She grinned, signing back, "Someone has to keep you organized." Then softer, "I want a place where we can sign without worrying who's watching, where it's just us." I took her hand, feeling the callus on her thumb from years of holding thermometers in tiny hands. "We'll find it," I signed. "Or we'll build it." She leaned her head on my shoulder and we watched the stars peek through the clouds, the rain long gone. Her fingers traced the family sign on the carved wood, now hanging on a leather cord around her neck. I didn't need to ask what she was thinking. I could feel it in the way she held my hand and the way she didn't pull away when the future felt big. We were still learning each other, still weaving those careful stitches. But the blanket was taking shape, warm and strong, and I knew we'd keep adding to it, one quiet moment at a time. The morning of the wedding dawned clear, the kind of crisp Oregon spring day where the air smells of wet grass and possibility. We'd chosen the backyard of my woodworking shop for the ceremony, nothing fancy, just a patch of green surrounded by stacks of lumber and the faint scent of cedar. 30 chairs were set in a loose circle facing a simple arch I'd built from reclaimed barnwood, its curves smooth under layers of oil. White wildflowers picked from the field behind the shop were tied to the posts with twine. Milo, wearing a bow tie Elena had sewn from an old flannel shirt, pranced between the seats, his tail wagging like a metronome. Elena had insisted on small. Just the people who matter she'd signed, and I agreed. My mom sat in the front row, her eyes bright, signing, "Beautiful," over and over. Elena's parents were there, her dad's hands shaky but proud, as he practiced the ASL phrase she'd taught him, "Welcome to the family." Sarah from Bluebird Cafe brought a tray of cinnamon rolls, setting them on a table beside a pitcher of iced tea. No caterers, no string quartet, just us, our people, and the hum of a day that felt right. Elena appeared at the edge of the yard and my breath caught. She wore a simple ivory dress, sleeveless, with a neckline that dipped just enough to show the carved wood pendant I'd given her months ago. Her hair was loose, catching the sunlight, and she carried a small bouquet of daisies. Her mom walked beside her, but Elena's eyes were on me, steady and sure. When she reached the art she signed, "You clean up nice," her smile, teasing but soft. I'd traded my usual flannel for a white shirt and dark jeans, the closest I'd ever get to a suit. I signed back, "You're stealing my heart again." The efficient, a friend from the shop who'd gotten certified online, grinned and began, her voice low for those who needed it, her hands signing for Elena and anyone else who followed. There was no music, no spoken vows that needed sound. Instead, we faced each other under the arch, Milo sitting between us like a fluffy witness. I took Elena's hands, feeling the familiar calluses, the warmth that had become my anchor. We signed our promises, slow and deliberate, our hands moving in sync. "I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every silent day." Her eyes glistened, but her smile didn't waver. She signed back, "I choose you," in noise or quiet, in scars and strength. The crowd, our small, perfect crowd, watched in silence, some signing along, others just feeling the weight of it. My mom wiped her eyes, her hands trembling as she signed, "Proud." When the officiant pronounced us married, I didn't kiss Elena right away. I signed, "May I." She laughed, a sound I'd learned to feel in the way her shoulders shook, and signed, "Always." Then I kissed her soft and slow, her hands framing my face. Milo barked once, sharp and joyful, breaking the quiet, and everyone laughed. The reception was just as simple: folding tables under string lights, potluck dishes from friends, and a playlist Elena had curated heavy on songs with strong bass lines she could feel through the floor. We danced our first dance with hands, not feet, a choreographed ASL routine we'd practiced in my apartment, laughing when I fumbled the signs for "Forever." Her dad joined in, his hands clumsy but earnest, and soon half the guests were trying to sign along, their gestures messy but full of heart. We didn't honeymoon right away. Instead, we moved into a small house 10 minutes from the shop, a fixer-upper with a big backyard and a porch that creaked just right. Elena painted the kitchen yellow, bright enough to feel like sunlight even on gray days. I built a workbench in the garage and a reading nook by the window, complete with a shelf for her medical journals and my woodworking books. Milo claimed the couch, and we adopted a second dog, a deaf beagle from the shelter, gray-muzzled and gentle. We named her Echo because she followed Milo everywhere, her paws silent on the hardwood. Elena kept working at St. Mary's, coming home with stories of kids who drew her pictures or called her nurse superhero. I expanded the shop, taking on custom orders: a crib for a neighbor, a dining table with carved initials hidden in the grain. We'd sit on the porch at night, signing about our days, Milo and Echo sprawled at our feet. Some nights we didn't sign at all, just sat her head on my shoulder, my hand tracing lazy circles on her arm. One year in Bluebird Cafe put up a small plaque at table 6, where someone listened, not with ears but with heart. We still went every Wednesday, ordering the same black coffee for me, hot chocolate for her. The baristas knew our order, and Sarah would slide an extra pickle onto my plate with a wink. We'd sit, sign about the week, and watch new faces come and go, wondering what stories they carried. Sometimes kids from the hospital would spot Elena and run over, their hands flapping with excitement as they signed, "Hi, Nurse Elena." She'd light up, signing back, introducing me as her husband, the wood guy. I'd carve them tiny animals on the spot, a bear, a fox, while Elena told them to be brave for their next checkup. Milo and Echo would nap under the table, their tails twitching in dreams. Life wasn't perfect. There were nights when Elena woke from nightmares about the hospital, her hands clutching the sheets. I'd hold her signing "I'm here" until her breathing slowed. There were days when the shop overwhelmed me, orders piling up, and I'd come home quiet, my hands too tired to sign. She'd make tea, sit beside me, and wait until I was ready to talk or not talk. We learned each other's silences the way you learn the grain of wood before you cut. 5 years later, we added a swing to the backyard big enough for 2.5 because Elena was pregnant, a surprise that made us both laugh and cry in the same breath. We didn't find out the gender, we just practiced signing baby and love until it felt natural. The nursery had a crib I'd built from cherry wood, its headboard carved with tiny hands in ASL for safe. On our anniversary, we returned to table 6, just us and the dogs. The plaque was still there, a little worn, but shining under the cafe lights. Elena signed, "This is where it started." I signed back, "And where it keeps going." She pulled out the carved wood pendant, now polished smooth from years of wear, and pressed it into my hand. Family. Trust. I kissed her, the cafe humming around us, and knew this was our story, not loud, not flashy, but ours. A life built one careful cut, one quiet sign, one chosen day at a time.